Hi, my name is Kate Busker, and I live in Detroit Lakes, Minnesota. And I have been living here for about 11 years. I can't believe it. And God led me here to this place, this wonderful community that I get to call home, and where I got to start a family here. So I was approached by a good friend to share my testimony, and I am so excited to be here. And I prayed before that the words that I am about to say, that they are God's words, that others are to hear, and that God helps me to share them in love. And I looked up what the word testimony meant, what the definition is of testimony. And it talked about having evidence or proof of the existence or appearance of something. And for me, that something is God. And this is my story of my faith and how I have a personal relationship with God. And I'm really grateful to be here today to share this with all of you. Where I grew up was a small town in Minnesota, and I grew up with my parents, who are still together, married over 40 years, and a little brother, 2 years younger. And I grew up in a good home, a home full of love, and a home that brought me up in a religion that I was taught, going to religious school through 6th grade, about a God that loved me and that sent his son Jesus, and about a God, though, that was also fearing. I was afraid of God, and I was afraid to sin and afraid to make mistakes because I wanted God to love me so much, just like I learned about through all my schooling, through all my grade school and high school years. So I was grateful to have this foundation in knowing God and Jesus. And, as I got into high school, I really started feeling a little torn about God and who God was. And I started drinking at a pretty early age. It was probably about 13 when I started drinking, just to fit in with others. And yet I would go and lead youth group. So I really was leading this double life as a teenager. And it started catching up with me, the guilt of this. And when things changed in friendships, as they do in teenagers, I really felt like I was alone. And I didn't feel like I deserved having this God that I grew up knowing because of the mistakes I made. And I started getting depressed. And when I got depressed, it was a really dark hole. It was a black hole that I couldn't find my way out. And I started feeling like maybe my life isn't worth living. And I went to a retreat because I still lived that life on the outside of having things together. And when I went to this retreat, I finally opened up about my depression and my thoughts that life wasn't worth living. And I was surrounded in this fellowship of love. God put all these people there to show me that my life mattered and to show me that he loved me. And I realized that my thinking was not of him. And my thinking was just punishing myself. And so I renewed my faith then and began to walk a life that was more aligned with God and his purpose for me. So as I graduated high school and went off to college, I began to have fellowship with another organization in college called Campus Crusade for Christ. And that is where I accepted Jesus into my life and began a personal relationship with Jesus. And that road was like a spiritual high, knowing that Jesus was and is God's son that came to save me, that he surrendered his life for me. And I understood that I mattered that much. And so I was on this high that I wanted to tell everybody about. And I felt that I fit into a different church. And so as I made my way to a different religious denomination, I met a lot of different people. And I really found a different identity. And my husband and I got married when I was about 20. And so I was quite young. And about a month after, we had moved into our apartment, and I was going to college still. And my husband worked away from home. And here it was only a couple months after we got married in our new place. And I had all these photos laying on the ground on our floor of our wedding pictures, and going through them. There was a knock on the door, and I opened it up, and there was a young man there, and we were chatting. He was moving into the apartment, went to the same college, a few blocks away. And so I let him in to keep chatting. And the next thing I know, I was pinned on the floor, and I was being sexually assaulted. And I froze. I froze underneath him. And at this time, 20 years ago, our landline rang, the phone rang. And I got out from underneath him and picked up that receiver. And I opened up the apartment door that was right next to this landline. And with my back to this young man, he walked out my door. He just walked out. I closed the door and I locked it. And that phone call on the other end was my sister-in-law. You know, like I said, my husband, we've just been married a few months, wedding photos all over my floor. And my husband worked away from home, and my sister-in-law never calls me. And she called that day at that time. And I got out from underneath this man, and I was able to answer the phone. You know, I've learned in life that there's things that people want to say it's coincidence, and there's things that people want to say it's fate or karma or, you know, whatever. And for me, in my journey, there's miracles that are not any of those. They're God's miracles to me that I've been a witness of. And I like to call them Godcidences. They're not coincidences. They're from God. They're Godcidences in my life to say that I am protected and safe. To say that my life matters to Him. And He is just powerful enough to make that happen. To make that man just walk out of my room, out of my home. And I struggled. I struggled with intimacy. I struggled with blame and shame for letting this guy in. I struggled and I blamed myself. And I blamed God. I was angry that this happened. And yet I knew that I shouldn't be angry at God, because God is God, and He did save me from more harm that could have been. And so I really struggled with that. And so I sort of pulled away from God for a while. I still went to church, and I led this life that others thought I had it all together maybe, but inside I sort of let go of this personal relationship that I had found. And, my husband and I, we have a very strong marriage. I'm so grateful that God gave me a man who is so strong in my life. And when I graduated school, we decided to start a family, and we moved down to Detroit Lakes, and we began that road of trying to become parents. And in that journey, I was unable to carry my own pregnancy. And so we tried in vitro, and we went down that road that led us to have a pregnancy. But then I lost that baby too. And so I had endured a couple miscarriages, and that one, even a D&C. And the doctor said, that's it, there's no more. We can't do anything. You're unable to carry. Your body rejects the embryo. and more anger to God, because I felt all I wanted to do was be a mom. And I struggled with that. I struggled with a lot of trauma from trying to become a mom that way and then having to let go. But my heart was always open to adoption. And my husband, his heart began to be open to adoption. So we started that journey of adoption, and a year later, we were chosen. And after we met birth mom and became a match, as happens in adoption, 10 days later, our son was born. And when he was a year old, we decided we wanted to try the adoption route again. And 3 years later, 3 years, when we were almost saying, that's it, we're done, God gave us another son. And he gave us that notice of 24 hours. And our second son was here. So we're very blessed to have our boys. And I know that this is God too. And, you know, as I said, I still didn't have a very personal relationship with God. And I found myself in the years becoming addicted. And I have an addiction. I am a food addict. My addiction is to food and certain substances in food. And what this does to me is what it does to any person that identifies with an addiction. I can't stop once I start eating certain foods. And then when I stop, I can't stop from starting again. And this vicious cycle for me happened over and over. And I hid my addiction to food from everyone. I would go through drive-thrus or buy boxes of candy, and I would get rid of the garbage so no one saw. I would, every time my husband was out of the kitchen, I would shove food in my face. I used it as comfort. I used it because I was lacking something really big in my life. I felt like I didn't measure up a lot, and I felt like I wasn't good enough. And food gave me comfort, and food became a god. And as long as I had my fix, then I felt okay. And I tried every diet. I did every new gimmick of pill and everything else. I really abused my body a lot, trying to control my binges, my overeating. And then I got into exercise, because if something was going to affect my binge eating, it would be exercise. I could control it that way. And I'd go for a while without eating substances, and then pretty soon I'd have a binge, and I'd be gone for 5 days just shoving food in my mouth. One binge I had was over Thanksgiving, 5 days, and all I did was eat. And I felt awful. I felt so miserable. I felt depressed, lonely. I felt like life maybe wasn't worth living again. And what happened then was I found a fellowship that was a 12-step recovery program that I walked into after that Thanksgiving and have been in ever since. And I have learned so much about myself. But the biggest thing is I have this personal relationship with God again. This fellowship allowed me to learn that I'm not in control, that I am not someone that needs to worry about what other people think, that God loves me for who I am, that He created me just the way I am so that I could learn to live my life and speak my truth as He created me to do. And And as I learned and went through this recovery process, I began to understand that my exercise was a problem too. And I used to compensate and control my food with this. And so I learned that I needed to take a break from all of it, that I needed to step away from exercise, that I needed to focus on God, that I needed to heal. I needed to heal some traumas that I just told you about, that I've been carrying around for a long time. And I also needed to realize that this hole that was in my life, this big hole that I used all these other things, these foods and exercise and many other things, controlling things, micromanaging everything to make me feel like I had power and control. I had to use those things to realize what the hole was really missing. And that was God. My hole in my life where I felt unworthy, like I didn't matter, that maybe I wasn't going to be loved, that I was going to be abandoned by the people that love me most because they're going to find out the real me. That hole had to only be filled by God. And I'm really grateful today because this program, this life that I get to live today is a life worth living. It's filled with miracles every day. Every day I see God in my life. And maybe you wonder how I did that, how I got here. And that's what I want to share. I got here by surrendering. That's what I did. I said, take me as I am. This is it. This is me. And I don't want this life anymore. This life where food controlled my life. I want the life that you created me for. And I handed the reins to God that day. And every day I surrender. Every day I get up and I sit on the edge of my bed and I give myself a hug. I wrap my arms around myself and I say, thank you, God, for this day. I surrender. Take me as I am. Do with me what you will. Thy will be done, not mine. That's my prayer every day. So when I surrendered, then I had to look at myself. I had to look at everything that I did to others, and that I did to myself, that I did to my body. And I started working on that. I started working on me. And I just started letting go of what I thought I knew. Because God's the one that knows. And the change that's happened in me because of this life, because of surrendering, because of accepting that God is that powerful and loves me that much, that He could change me. And my personality has changed. I have changed so much. I don't feel the need to micromanage and control every detail of every day. I wake up and I pray that little prayer and I allow God to take me through my day. I give Him the reins. He's the director of my play today. And in this play, I'm just the actor. And He gets to show me the miracles. And that's just it. It's a miracle that I'm sober today. It's a miracle that He's changed me, that I have had a spiritual awakening, that I know God personally, that I talk to Him. This morning, when I sat down to have breakfast with my kids, we invited God to have breakfast with us. He's that personal that I want to have tea with Him. He's that personal that I say, let's go to work together. And when He calls upon me to pray with patients as I work in the healthcare, I pray with them. He gives me the courage and the strength. He gives me the words, just like He is right now. I was nervous about coming out here and saying this and speaking my truth and my story. And I just prayed, God, your will be done. Give me the words that you need others to hear. Help me to reach the lost souls that need you. Because I was a lost soul, and I'm no different than anyone out there. I am no better. I am no worse. I am created by the same creator that created each and every one of us. I was created out of love, just like each and every one of us. So I prayed to God today, and I said, please, how should I come? What do you have me say? And all I heard was, come as you are, just as I am, just as I love you, he says. And I sat there with that, come as you are. And I thought about how, in my surrendering, I've learned to be vulnerable. And vulnerability is really hard for somebody with a real strong exterior as myself. But he's helped me to have cracks in the strong exterior. He's helped me to be vulnerable and to see that in being vulnerable is really strength. That's what vulnerability is. That's what surrendering is. It's not giving up. Surrender has nothing to do with giving up. Surrender has to do with fighting in a whole new way. Fighting by allowing God to fight your battles for you. And that's the thing. That's something that was really big for me to learn. Because when I grew up with the God I mentioned before, the God that maybe wasn't so personal to me, that God was a God that I was afraid was going to do everything to me. If I wasn't perfect, if I didn't live the life he thought, I felt like that God, I could only go to him for certain things, big things, praying for others. Because I believe in the power of prayer, I always have. But I would only pray for these big things. And that's not my God today. God cares about every little detail. And that I saw one day when I was meditating this summer. Sitting outside, nobody was up yet. Well, at least I don't think they were up. Maybe the neighbors were looking at me, wondering what I was doing, sitting out on the grass. But I sat there, and as I was meditating and praying with God, I saw all these drops of dew on every blade of grass. Do you know that? That every blade of grass has a drop of dew, a good morning kiss from God. That's the finite details that he cares about us for. Isn't that amazing? I am so grateful that he's my God and that he doesn't do things to me. No, that's not the God I know. That's not the God that's personal to me. He does things for me. God is for us. And I just want to close with this devotional. The miracles, I asked myself, this testimony, what's this about? Is how does God show up for me? How has he shown up for me? And I've told you how he showed up with me through every big thing that happened in my life. But he shows up in the little ways too, every day. And today, he showed up in my devotional that I read. I prayed about this testimony and being here today with you. And he shared the title of this testimony, or this devotional, is Value Your Past. Value your past. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about how I got here today, my past, and how I value it today. Every bit of it. Because I needed it. And it says in here, sometimes those experiences form the most important parts of you because they created in you compassion and understanding for others. Often, the most painful events of your life are the ones that opened you to your ability to bring healing, help, and hope to others. That's what I want to do today. That's what I want to do. It says your past taught you to love others and yourself. And it's true. For the first time, I feel like I can truly say I love myself. Because I know that God created me. And it has helped me, it says to end this devotional, it has helped you to become a channel for God's love and a force for good in this world. If nothing else, I pray that you hear the story and you just know that I'm no different than anyone. But I surrendered. And I began this personal relationship with God like I know I am today. And that's my prayer, to bring hope, healing, and love to everyone that sees this. And thank you so much for asking me to be here today. I'm really grateful that I could share my testimony with you all.